Hello, everybody.
It's been a long time.
Hey, Scott.
It has been a long time, Kathy.
Yeah, how many
Michael,
years?
same to you. Jimmy's not been long enough.
All right, so welcome to the podcast, Scotty.
Woohoo!
Episode number 4. We have Kathy, we have Jim. So we're just going to jump right into it. So Scotty goes back to Boston days with Jim and Kathy in the mid-'80s. You guys started Kafko Construction, and shortly thereafter, Jim got introduced to Isaac Tigret, who was one of the co-founders of Hard Rock Cafe. He was looking for a builder, designer, partner to help with his new concept, which eventually became the House of Blues in Cambridge in 89. So by 89, you're now working House of Blues. And a few years after that, after the success of House of Blues Cambridge, House of Blues 1, there's New Orleans in the French Quarter on Decatur Street, and then Chicago. And I think Scotty comes in the picture in Chicago. Is that right?
Yeah, Chicago 96 is when I started.
How does Scotty come on the scene in 96 in Chicago building House of Blues?
So it's a funny story, actually. So I was in between projects and I was looking for a new company to work for. And a friend of mine suggested Dodge Electric. They were looking for a guy to go on the road and work remote on nightclubs. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. I don't have any responsibilities, 30 years old. Hey, this could be fun. So I went and met the owners of Dodge Electric, and they hired me. And 3 days later, I'm on a plane heading to Chicago. I'm like, oh my God. Met the guys, looked at the project, was overwhelmed, quite honestly. This huge project. I'd never been involved with anything like that, of that size. So it took me a while to get acclimated. Big union job, had to join the union, because in Chicago, if you're not part of the union, they'll bury you out back in the bushes. So the project manager from Dodge Electric was telling me stories about this guy, this Jim Cafarelli. You got to watch out for him. He's really tough. He's a prick, to be honest with you. He expects a lot. He doesn't take any crap. And, just be wary. Just be aware of him. I'm like, come on. So I heard these stories. And then I started hearing stories from other contractors, the general contractor, guys on the job. Because the job had been going for weeks, actually months before I got there. And all I heard was these horror stories about Jim Cafarelli. So one day, we're all down in the pit on the dance floor, a bunch of guys, and looking at each other going, what the hell is that smell? It got stronger and stronger. We're all looking, and through the doors to the dance floor walks Jim Cafarelli. I'm like, what the hell is this guy? His cologne had broken in his bag at the airport or whatever, and his clothes were soaked in cologne. He was like, who the hell is this Guido mother? It's like, it was, we all started laughing and said, hey, no laughing. That's Jim Cafarelli. And I'm like, holy shit. That was my first introduction to him. Then he went on a tirade, they started yelling at people. And I'm like, okay, I got to find something to do. So I kind of disappeared. And that was my first introduction to Jim Cafarelli. It's the
first time you met him was when he smelled like that?
Smelly Cafarelli.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, Scotty, since that day, I've never worn a drop of cologne since. And I think I still have some of that on me 16 years later, 17 years later.
Man,
but
it was
that was, I didn't really remember that story until you and I were talking recently. But, there's a little backstory here, Michael. The project was a very complicated project. It was a big project. I think we had, 120 men a day there, and we did sign these. Yeah. Was more? Yeah, probably was more than that. From the steel
this
guys,
is right on the water with the corn cob, a condo of those parking garages, the Opera House.
Yeah, those two towers,
those two towers
there.
Marina, what it was called.
Those two towers they call the Corn Cob Towers. They actually filmed a Steve McQueen movie when he drives the car off into the actual river, there was a marina underneath the property. There was this whale-looking building that was lead-clad. That was actually a television studio where we ended up putting the House of Blues. So you had a very diverse project. It had gone bankrupt, and this developer named John Marks had purchased the whole thing. There was an underground mall because it's so cold in the winter. People don't even go outside. They walk in through all these tunnels and malls. And the House of Blues had taken this one building that looked like the Whale, and we needed to put an entire live music venue and restaurant inside of this facility. So the other thing that complicated the project was this concept wasn't really completely ferreted out. The first two had looked like Southern Mississippi juke joints, rusted corrugated metal. But the founder, Isaac Tigret, when he saw this space, he said, we need this to be something really special. And he had this idea of an opera house. And then I brought Cy Teller, who someday I'd love to have on one of these podcasts. And he had a renderer come in. And this guy, actually, the rendering is right there.
That's Chicago. Yeah.
That's the actual rendering, yeah. And
so this has to have been twice the size of Cambridge and New Orleans.
It was 10 times the size. Cambridge was tiny.
10 times.
This was a 60,000 square foot venue. And this renderer, Weiss, captured exactly what I was trying to get across to him to show everyone. And once we sort of had that rendering, we actually put it up on the job so people could understand what we were trying to do. But that really complicated things. And we were still designing while we were building, which always is a challenge. And changes, when they're made, they impact the mechanical trades more than other trades. So the electrical package there was a big package to begin with. And then we compounded the complexity of it by making so many changes. So Dodge Electric has a team that was traveling around the country with me, and the foreman of that team suddenly had to go back to Boston. It was a problem. He had to go back to Boston. So now I have this large electrical crew on a fast-paced job. It's a union job, and which means, you're burning at a higher rate. The union rates are higher than, open shop rates in other parts of the country. And I tell Steve, we got to get a guy in here. Because I've got a guy coming. One night I go into my construction shack that's built on the job, and there's Scotty. Hi, how you doing? And some quick introductions. Right. Yeah. Can we do this outside? And so I take a legal pad of paper and I make a very lengthy list of all the areas, the problems, things that need to be found out, decided, done, accomplished, things that were impacting other trades. If we don't get these done, it backs up 3-4 other trades. And there could be a logjam caused by electrical problems. So it really was imperative that we get a handle on this. So I make this big, long list and I hand it to Scotty and I say, don't come back and see me until you get this done. And off he goes. So the next morning, I see him out there working with his team, and I stay away from him. I'm dealing with a lot of other issues, and I forget about him. And then around 7 or 8 o'clock that night, I go back into the construction shed, and there's Scotty. And I said, "Oh, how'd you make out?" He says, "I'm all set. I'm done with that list. What do you have next?" I said, "Give me that thing." And I take a look at the list. I start going through it, and this is done, this is done, this is done. This can be done, but we need this information. This here, we're waiting on that piece of equipment, but we'll have it done by Friday. And there's a list explaining if it's done or if it's not done, why, or when it will get done. And I said, okay, well, I make another list. I send it off to him. But the next day, I watch him. I watch what he's doing. And the guys all rally around him. And they're just like worker bees all over the project. And we get together, later on that day. And I realize this guy is the real deal. This guy is no bullshit kind of guy. And he's got that sort of get it done attitude. If people wouldn't or didn't do what he wanted, he would either go through them, around them, over them, or remove them. And all of a sudden, this huge problem that I had on this project, to a large degree, was solved because All I had to do now is just go to one person and say, Scotty, I need this done. And it would get done one way or the other. And that's how we met. And it really was just hard work. And that grew into mutual respect. And then that grew into a long friendship, which, Scotty, I think we've now been working and have known each other and been friends for 30 years.
30 years. Yeah, it's been 30 years. So,
30 years.
That Chicago project, Dodge Electric, we had a very narrow scope because Dodge Electric, we had what were called low voltage license union permits. So we only had a narrow scope. We couldn't actually do hands-on electric work. So it was always a challenge to work around the unions to get things done. Once you make friends with them and you show them you know what you're doing, and they work with you. I mean, it was a fast-paced job. We ended up working 18, 20 hours a day to get that thing done. It was brutal.
Yeah.
In the end, it was really fun. I had a really good time with that project. It was so unique and interesting. So many things that we designed and came up with on the fly. All the UV lighting that we ended up doing on the face of those balconies, and it was really fun job. So that was
that UV lighting was interesting because we had, in order to create this opera effect, we had gone to a fellow who I had found in Southern California, a company called Moonlight Molds. Very, very talented guy. At the time, had a small operation. It has since become very large. I think probably the largest mold manufacturer in the country now, but at the time he was very small. I went out to his facility in Gardenia, California, and in order to make this room, which was just a big steel round shell, look like an opera house, we had to be very smart about how we did the plaster work. His name is Paul Drabelbis, and he said, if you take this part and we kind of cut it here, we can then mesh it up to this column. And when I learned how he was doing that, and I started to go through all of his different books, in those days, nothing was there was no internet in those days, by the way. Everything was in these binders. And he had all the molds on racks like you would see at Costco out in this shop. And we learned how to fuse the different parts together to make the balconies and to make the actual seating opera house look. And he would then just modify the mold and make the parts for us. And when you're dealing with plaster, the money is in making the mold. Once you actually have the mold made, then you just reproduce so many parts out of that. And what we were doing is benefiting by the fact that he had all these molds, and we were just adapting them and making them fit together. And it was magic. And we thought we had a good handle on the whole thing. And then the discussion was, well, what do we do about painting it, what color and so forth? And Isaac said, wouldn't it be cool to have ultraviolet light so that all the wild colors that you normally have at a house of blues are one setting, but with the flick of a switch, it turns into black lighting. It's a totally different color, which is a great idea. But that had not been incorporated into the design. No provisions were made for where the lights would go and how to power them up and how to control it all. It was just like, can you do that? So we got together with Scotty and talked to Paul, and we started to figure out where these light fixtures would go. And Scotty had to then figure out how to do controlling for it all and where it would be accessed from. And through this project, which is running like a freight train anyway, a major design change like that gets incorporated seamlessly, like nothing. And I don't think anyone really ever gave anyone, you or anyone, the credit of what it took to pull that off without a hitch. We just did it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of support. I mean, I had a lot of support from back home, but to source the right size fixture, to make the radiuses in those molds, and then find the black light tubes, and then the kicker was, crap was falling off the ledges of the balconies into the troughs and covering up the lights. Then we had to come up with a graded cover to put over that, but not impact the lighting. So we had, I don't know how many samples of plastic that we tried, and a lot of it was UV blocking, which negated what we were trying to do. So we finally came up with something, and in the end, it turned out well, and I was really happy with it. But that was just one of the things. One of the most unusual parts of that project was Jimmy hands me this lamp. This is a bar lamp. All right, this little wooden lamp with a funky shade. It had bottle caps on it, and then when he hands it to me, he goes, "I need an outlet and a computer outlet in this." I'm like, "That thing's only 6 inches tall. How am I going to do that?" So I said, "Who do I talk to?" He goes, "Talk to Jim Cush." Okay. I'm on the phone with Jim Cush, like, "I need this." He started laughing, but yeah, it came back and we were able to do it. It ended up being a little bit taller, but in the end, we accomplished that task too. So that's what really made the project fun. Is he would throw these ridiculous requests at me, and like, okay, how do we do that? So,
Jimmy Cush is a mill worker, right?
yeah,
Yes.
Jim Cush was the mill worker extraordinaire. Yeah, he was really good.
He is. I think, Michael, in my career, when you talk about truly exceptional people, unique, one of a kind people, best at what they do, you have Scotty, you have Jake Casson, who we did a previous podcast with. We had Cy Teller. I think, to me, is the most creative designer I've ever met, bar none. And Jimmy Cush as a mill worker, he was a magician on taking these crazy ideas and figuring out how to make them affordably. And he also traveled all around the country with us. He made millwork and would put it in containers and ship the containers to Florida or LA or wherever we were. And then we'd peel them open and everything would be, on a set of drawings and numbered. And maybe he'd send a guy out and we'd assemble the whole thing. And there was a set of carpenters that also, Neil and Chris and that whole gang that traveled with us. We found that it was better to take the talented team of the experts that knew the most about the real look and feel of the venue that the customer experiences, and just put them on planes and put them in hotels and have them work on the project with local tradesmen.
Holly Mandel was another one.
Yeah, she was phenomenal.
And it got things done better, faster, and they all became friends. And, there's some of these relationships that go on to this very day. The GC, by the way, who built Chicago, is a fellow named Mike Brown from Crane Construction. He's since retired. We became great friends afterwards. I actually brought him
Funny you
down.
say that.
Yeah. And he built Orlando, House of Blues Orlando for us, because I couldn't get guys that would do the project affordably down there, or they were intimidated by it. And we talked about one time, and he said, "I'll go down there." I said, "You'll come and fly?" "Sure." He sent the team down and did the same thing. So yeah, when you find the right people, you they migrate to you, and you tend to stick together and protect one another, and great friendships.
I have one last Chicago story. Yeah, you have a basic idea of what this project was like. So every week, Jimmy would fly in, and we'd have this god awful project meeting in this old conference room of this office, and we're all packed in there. Had to be 30 guys in there, all the foremen and the GCs and everybody, and the screaming and the yelling and just the back and forth. You're an asshole. But the best part is when Mike Brown stood up, took his phone, and threw it across the room, and it smashed on the wall. And then another phone goes across the room and smashed on the wall. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So that's what they were like. Those meetings, the project, it was so intense that everybody was under a lot of pressure. In the end, it was a hell of a thing.
It was. Now, one thing I don't remember, Scotty, when you first came out there, was it the summer or the winter?
It was September.
It was September, okay. Because, once winter set in out there, Michael, it's the coldest place I've ever worked with in this country. That place is just bone chilling. And
it was brutal.
Holding on to the rope to cross the plaza.
That's a true story. That's a true story.
It was miserable. Yeah. But still fun.
So you come in Chicago. What do you think? So Chicago wraps up, but before Chicago even opens, Jim, are you already on the next site?
Yeah, we actually ended up, at one point, we had 3 projects going. We were doing Chicago, Myrtle Beach, and LA. Myrtle Beach was in South Carolina on a property that was called Barefoot Landing. We had a local developer partner down there, a guy named Sam Puglia, a really nice guy, talented guy. And that was on a site where the Alabama Theater was right across the parking lot from us. And the Alligator Adventure Farm was right on the main drag. And we took a spot in the middle. They knocked some building down there and we put a huge House of Blues, much more of a plantation style, where it was a building that had the live music venue. It had a separate building that was the restaurant. And then there was a sort of retail store in the front, and there were walkways that led through them. And then there was a huge deck that oversaw this swamp area where the Alligator Adventure Farm was. And in LA, we were right on Sunset Boulevard.
Mm-hmm. I want to say, 8340 Sunset? I'm right down the street from. So, Scotty, do you go from Chicago to Myrtle Beach?
Yeah, so I went Chicago. We took a plane ride before the project was complete to Myrtle Beach. My God. So the South 30 years ago. Yeah.
Well, you live in North Carolina now, right?
I live in North Carolina. I'm on the border of North and South.
So you have a pass. Whatever you're about to say, you have a pass.
Yeah. So 30 years ago, you didn't have the northerly migration you have now. So it was, they hated Yankees. No good fucking Yankees. We hate you. Go back north again. It was brutal. It was like they were still fighting the Civil War, and I'm fighting every day. Oh my God. But, again, once you get on a project and you meet everybody, start talking to them, and they understand, what you're doing, then, they accept you, kind of. Yeah, that was a unique project. When you have guys show up for work in bare feet, you're in the South. But yeah, the Myrtle Beach project is where I really sort of transitioned from doing just electrical lighting and the design and the dimming systems and that. I kind of transitioned into more of a liaison between Jimmy and the project. I took on a little bit more responsibilities to oversee a lot more of what was going on there, as far as all the systems, the computer systems, micro systems, phone systems, all that stuff.
All the AV, all the AVL, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was interesting too. Kept me, busy, like all the rest of the project. North Myrtle Beach, actually, people get mad if I would say Myrtle Beach, but it's North Myrtle Beach. But great people. Shep, he was awesome.
Greg Hunt.
Greg Hunt. I still work with Greg Hunt. Been a good relationship.
And then from Myrtle Beach, do you think you go to Orlando or LA?
LA was done prior to Chicago, so that was completed. I didn't have anything to do with LA, unfortunately, because that was really a cool project because of the hydraulic bar and all kinds
of the stage.
The way that
Jim, explain that.
Yeah.
So this one, what made this one unique, aside from being in West Hollywood on the Sunset Strip, was it was new construction, but in the end we made this look very old. But it was a steel superstructure building with suspended concrete slabs, and we had to shore the side of Sunset Boulevard because even though it looked like a single-story building on Sunset, it was actually 3 stories deep, and it was a huge building. It was 48,000 square feet. But in the mid-level where the restaurant was, Isaac had this idea of he wanted the bar somehow to open so you could see from the restaurant down to the club. And that was as simple as that. There was like, I'd like to see if you can make the bar sort of move so we can see down into the club. So I took that and I understood the complications of what that would be. And I went to a theme park ride manufacturer, a company called Ride and Show. They did a lot of work at Universal, did a lot of work at Walt Disney Company, which we'll talk about later. Fortunately, that idea was given to us very early on, so we were actually able to incorporate what it would take in order to make these bars move. And what they really were these huge steel platforms. Each one was 40 feet by 18 feet, and they were on hangers, and there were curved rolled beams that we buried up in the superstructure of the steel, and they hung this platform And ultimately, on the press of a button, the platforms would swing out 90 degrees. So that's almost 100 feet long. And you would look down into this club that was below, which was a 2,200 person club. But while that was happening, there was a hydraulic stage that would rise out of the ground. So the people in the restaurant didn't know about the club. The people in the club didn't know about the people in the restaurant. On the push of a button, everything would sort of expose itself while people were sitting at the bar or standing at the bar. And we had these gates that closed, and there were safety devices, so people couldn't get in the way of where it was swinging into. And it was an amazing event, one of a kind. No one had ever done anything like it before, and we incorporated that in. So that I forgot to tell you. So that was done before we did Chicago. Okay, yeah, but that's where I met Bob Ward, which is another great guy I'd like to have. Just on the phone with him last night. Love to have a podcast with Bob.
Longtime Universal creative exec and all the theme parks. So, Scotty, you build at Disney World for House of Blues down at the time was called Downtown Disney?
Yeah, so we went from, again, about 3/4 way through North Myrtle Beach. We get on a plane, we go down to Disney World. And talk about different worlds. I mean, you go from
No
but
rules.
it still sounds good. You go from, North Myrtle Beach to, Orlando.
Orlando, I love you, Orlando.
Quite a dichotomy of people. One of the interesting things about North Myrtle Beach was, so somewhere along the process, somebody said, "Let's get a water tower." Okay, so we spent a whole day driving around South Carolina looking for a derelict water tower that we could buy and bring back to North Myrtle Beach and install it and light it. And it actually worked out pretty well. But we found one, and it's like, okay, how do we get it back? Well, we got to cut it up. Okay.
Cut it up, put it on
We
trucks.
cut it up, put it on a flatbed, and brought it back. And unfortunately, that same thing happened in Orlando, but that was a much more. That was the Orlando one. You have to understand, in North Myrtle Beach, they play fast and loose with building codes and
Yeah, they're not testing your welding down
good
there.
enough. Good enough for now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, good is no good. So they in Orlando, you have to live by Disney standards.
Reedy Creek at the time. Now it's the Central Florida Tourism District, but Reedy Creek had their own building codes.
Yeah, Reedy Creek. They had really, really, really strict building codes, and that was a challenge. But yeah, the Orlando one, again, another unique space, a lot of challenges.
Big facility. Big. Yeah,
but similar to North Myrtle Beach, so kind of knew what we were getting into. Aside from the building codes you dealt with, because anything that hung on the wall had to have a safety chain on it.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing could fall and land on the floor. It could only fall like 6 inches before it stopped or arrested. So that went with anything that was on a wall had to be arrested. So that was a challenge. And, most of the people that traveled, the traveling crew, really hadn't experienced that level of code to deal with. Basically the same GC. So the same phones were flying across in the trailer. Oh my God. Imagine this. So they're building this. What was it called, Jimmy?
It was the West End, the West Side.
Yeah, but they had a name for it. I forget what the name was. But they were building was a whole venue of restaurants and clubs. They were building all at the same time.
There's a Cirque du Soleil, which was next to it.
Yeah, I mean, this was going. I mean, they're building probably 40 different complexes all at the same time, and you had a sea of trailers in the parking lot that you had. I mean, those were your work trailers and GC trailer, our trailer. No, but it was a good half a mile from the site. So we had these gators that we drive back and forth to the site, and radios, and it was that was fun too. It was a project. Orlando itself, it's funny, not much to do there. other than Disney World. So you work all day and you go home, then you get up and you go back to work.
Right.
Uh,
Of course, we
but
did
you
drink
could.
in those
They
days.
gave us
So
passes to Disney World, which you did that a couple of times, and that's enough of that crap. And so it uh, food. It was unique. They're all unique.
yeah, that was so originally that was Pleasure Island, Scotty, and what we built was all called the Disney West End, which now is
It's now it's Disney Springs.
it's all Disney Springs, right?
Disney Springs, yeah.
And I ended up before I was done there, I ended up consulting with Bongos, Disney Quest. They originally, before Cirque du Soleil, they were trying to put a Broadway theater right next door to us.
Right.
I did some consulting for Wolfgang Puck.
There's a Wolfgang Puck there. The Disney Quest is not there anymore. I think it was like an MBA experience for a while or something.
But when we went down there, what happens is you have these contractors, and they think that you are a captive audience. So there weren't that many contractors that were approved by Disney that could even do this project or were available. They were very busy doing a lot of other things. So the prices I was getting to do this project were just completely, out of line. And at one point I went to the Disney guys and I said, look, I'd like to bring the guy from Chicago who just finished up there. He's a great contractor. You can vet him, but he's willing to come down here. We'll work with local subs, but he'll manage the project for me, because I'm flying around not only looking for new locations, but overseeing building the ones that we had. There was a lot going on. And once I was able to get Mike Brown involved in the project, it solved a lot of other problems. Like when we tried to buy wood flooring, which we needed, 40,000 square feet of Southern pine wood flooring, the prices were out of line. So because we had just finished at Myrtle Beach, we called our partner, friend, Shep Guyton, and they had a millwork shop. And we said, can you produce 40,000 square feet of, Southern yellow pine flooring for us down here? He said, if you give me enough time, I can. And so what we would do is we'd select the pieces that we felt were overpriced, and we would, bring other people in to do it. Jimmy Cush would do the millwork, and Scotty and Judge Electric would oversee the electrical. And it kept people honest. They knew that we had, options, and they knew that we had the ability to do things and get things done. So after a while, we were validated. We had sort of street credibility, and they'd be less to mess around with you. But one of those stories was the water tower. So the water tower, which I had long negotiations with Disney on where I wanted to put it. They didn't want the water tower, but then they didn't want to put it where I wanted to put it. And
now they incorporate it into the logo of Disney Springs, as part of the skyline.
It is part of the skyline, and it's a major, major component that you can see through 3 viewing corridors. And that's what I said to them. I said, this is where the sign needs to be, because you'll see it entering from this parking lot. You'll see it coming down from the Pleasure Island area, and you'll see it in the future development someday over here, whether it's Broadway Theater or whatever. And then you'll see it from the water. And that took an act of Congress, but we got it approved. But once we got it approved, we tried to have a local guy make a water tower for us. I think the price was $350,000. I said, okay, we're not going to do that. So we call back to Shep up, and I think Scotty was probably still in Myrtle Beach at the time. And when you're down in Myrtle Beach and driving up and down the main drag there, the Golden Mile, you can see water towers, rusted water towers that are abandoned everywhere. And there were landowners that would actually pay you to come and take it down just to get it off their property. So I said, Shep, we want a tower. And I told him the ones I liked around town. And he went and negotiated a deal, and they went over with a flatbed. They cut this thing down, laid it on the ground, cut it up in pieces, put it on. I think it was 2 flatbeds, actually. Shipped it down to Orlando. And then I had a local welding crew reassemble it, put it up with a couple of cranes. We might have done that whole thing for $75,000.
Well, unfortunately, they cut it up in about 2,000 pieces.
Well, yeah.
I mean, instead of just, cutting it up in a few pieces, I mean, there's like...
It wasn't just a side A and a side B.
Cut it into tiny squares. It's like... It took the welders, a month to put them back together.
And they do test their welds down there. They test everything down there.
And the craziest thing was they made it... Excuse me. They made us build a footing that was incredible. I'm like, why is this footing like this? It doesn't have any water in it. You're not holding up a water tower. It's just a decoration. But the footing went down 20 feet with
Yeah.
solid concrete. I'm like,
Yeah. It was like a launch pad for like the space shuttle.
yeah, it was just,
And then are you involved in House Blues Vegas at Mandalay Bay?
Now, my tenure with House of Blues ended with Disney World.
Okay. So then
I
you
think-
come back on the scene when Jim's consulting with restaurants in the celebrity chef era?
That's basically what happened. I came back home, to Boston area, and was working for Dodge Electric, just doing various projects around, bored out of my mind. But
you're originally from the North Shore, right?
I had North Shore in Beverly. Yeah. So, having done that for a couple of years, it's fun. Coming back and having to do regular electrical work was like, I'm going to shoot myself.
Yeah, but this time you're not really an electrician. You're more of a line designer, foreman, liaison, as you said. Whatever, project manager.
Whatever I needed to be. It made it interesting. So, time went by, and one day I got a call from Jimmy saying, hey, we're involved with this restaurateur, and we got these restaurants that we're going to do. I'm like, cool. I'm ready to make a move. So first one was Kingfish Hall, which was that was
so that's Faneuil Hall in Boston.
Yeah, that I've never seen anything like that before, except for one down we did later. But
this was two stories, probably what, 10,000 square feet? What do you think? More?
That was a hell of a concept. A lot of things going on, a lot of design elements, a lot of things to work on, to light and work and make and things.
There were water features, mechanical things were moving.
Water features.
Yeah.
The best one, this is the best. So Jimmy says, hey, we got this wood-fired grill over here. What? I want the meat to spin around and go around in circles
with
do flip-flops.
Real food.
Yeah. I want the fish to go around in circles and wave at you and wink. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
The dancing fish.
It's your feature.
Oh yeah, no problem. Let's do that. We got involved with a fabricator in Connecticut, Jay Fredericks, and he was doing the fish. He was doing the giant fish, the kingfish,
the sign,
and he was doing some other things too. I think some other fabricating. So I said, well, he's a fabricator. Let's see what I can do. So I gave him a call. I said, we have this wood-fired grill, big centerpiece, big focal point. We want the rotisserie, the rotisserie part of it to spin around in a circle. Well, that's no problem. Well, listen, they also want the individual fishes to spin at the same time. What? So he said, well, let me see what I can do. And, a couple weeks later, he comes back. Well, I have this hind joint thing, and I've come up with a concept, and I think it'll work. Okay. So I got him in touch with the wood-fired company. We actually sent the grill down to him so he could fabricate the whole mechanism to make this work. And he did one hell of a job because it did exactly what we wanted to do. And we could control the speed too, which was unique. So yeah, it went round and around, and the fishes went round and around. You could flip them up and back and down. And people were mesmerized by that.
And upstairs had the boost, right, with the step pedal that you could spin.
Yeah, he did the the big clamshell booth. He did you could spin around the hoods. Yeah, he did a lot of work for us.
And then downstairs, what's that again?
There was nothing this guy couldn't do, Michael. He was just such a great engineer, technician, manufacturer, and we also became great friends and did a lot of different projects with him. But we spent a lot of money on that grill, but it still was affordable enough to do it. I think we might have spent.
There was so much gold leaf that you could send someone to college. I think the Holly, everything was gold or silver leafed,
or copper.
And then the staircase had the sea glass railings, waterfall, and then when you went downstairs, you had old newspaper that we painted, and we had a picture of Scotty in the newspaper with a fish that was painted on the wall down in the bathroom. There was like a Where's Waldo if you looked in all the newspaper of Scotty. Okay, so that's like 2000 probably, right?
Yeah, I mean we had there was a unique. This is really one of the unique features was the open from first to second floor, but we had a big mobile hanging in the center.
Fish.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the challenge was, how do we light this thing and make it look like it's animated? So, 30 years ago, 28 years ago, that we didn't have the stuff we have today. So I had heard about a company in Boston on Milk Street called Color Kinetics. All right. They were brand new out of the box. Like 6 people work for the company, and they make a color changing product in a controller. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I can make the colors change to make it look animated. And it was LED. Now, back then, people, no idea what that meant. LEDs. What are those things? I got those, lighting up my display or my indicator lights. They didn't put out a lot of light. Color Kinetics had come up with a process and LEDs that actually put out a fair amount of light. They still weren't great, but it did what we wanted to do. So I went down, I took a walk down the Milk Street, knocked on the door, said, hey, I'm working on this project in Faneuil Hall. Would you guys be interested to come look and see what we can do to make this animated with colored light? They were like, yeah, let's do it. So we all walked back. We looked at it, and they said, yeah, we need 4 of these fixtures. Okay. And we'll give you this controller. This is the best part. Jimmy's smiling about this part. We're going to give it to you free because it's good advertising for us. Okay. So the best part was over the center, we never had to access it because LEDs, 1,000-hour lamp life, and you didn't need to get a ladder up there and blah, blah, blah. But in the end, it worked because, the color changes were subtle, but it made it look like you were shimmering down through the water, which was the effect that we were trying to come up with, and it worked. So that was my first go with Color Kinetics, and that relationship grew to some projects later on. But there was a lot going on in that project too. But we had custom glass. Remember the shades for the bar lamps, Jordana Corson? Yeah, she did the colored glass she came up and did the colored glass for the rails. And she's a custom glass blower. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I said to her, hey, I have to come up with this lampshade over the bar that kind of looks like fish or some sort of abstract view of a fish. And she came up with a lampshade, and they were beautiful. And we put those in, and those, and the unique feature there. But there was, again, all Jimmy's projects are like that. They're all challenges. They're all, I want to do this. Oh, Jesus. Okay, let's see what we can do. And God help you if you fail. That was the worst part. You never want to let them down. But
from that project, Michael, we launched a Rustic Kitchen across the street.
In Faneuil Hall.
We went to Coral Gables, Florida, which was the Rouse Company, who we talked about in one of our
At the time,
podcasts.
They were operating Faneuil Hall, and then they had another outdoor market in Miami.
Yep, they became a partner with us down in Coral Gables, Florida. And they said, we want a signature restaurant here for this entire mall that we're building. And we came up with this seafood concept called pescado, which roughly translated means fish when caught.
It's fish you eat. Just when you drive around LA and you go to a fish, it's pescado mojado, wet fish. You had a very gringo, it means fish that you eat. It's fish. You named your restaurant Fish.
Okay. So if you take this project in Faneuil Hall and turbocharge it, times
then you
10,
have pescado. Yeah.
That's what pescado became. So everything down there was done at, a whole
Miami,
new dimension. Yeah. That's Miami. And by then, the Color Kinetics, of course, the product Scotty can talk about much better, but it keeps advancing, keeps getting better, stronger. That was the problem with the early Color Kinetics. They
very early LEDs.
Strong. Yeah. Very early. They were big, and they weren't that.
It was more geeky kind of stuff. I mean, they were still trying to find their way. Output wasn't great yet. I
didn't realize you had them at Kingfish, because my memory of Color Kinetics is when you're running the job site for Rustic Kitchen Stewart Street, when by now you're basically just the foreman, you're running that site. You were telling that we did the whole bar with the strips. I think they're probably on like their third version of it by that point, a few years later. And you tell me about color kinetics and you're trying to explain to me how amazing it is. And I bought stock in their company because I'm like 13 probably at this point. And I'm like, okay, I trust Scotty on this. And then like 2 years later, Phillips, major conglomerate, buys them. And I made like a few $1,000s. It was like my first good trade was on a tip from Scotty on color kinetics.
Where's my vig?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. From Kingfish Hall, with that same restaurateur, we did, a couple other restaurants, one in New York and one in Washington, D.C. And, the traveling show just kept going. They all were unique in themselves and, challenges, but we just kept moving forward. And then, we started that project, Pescado, and that was the fun project.
That was a great project. That really
Yeah,
that won
it was-
all
it was-
kinds
it
of
was-
awards. That thing was off the chart.
Yeah, I mean, it built anywhere else in the world, it would have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
That the mall just didn't do it.
No.
Yeah. Speaking of fish, though, your whole life has been not about being an electrician or light designer. It's fishing. Is that accurate, or that's a big part of your life?
I've always enjoyed ocean fishing, fishing in general. I mean, growing up in Beverly, we're surrounded by ponds and lakes, and that's how as kids we spent the day. We were fishing, so I've always had a love for that. When I was working for another contractor, I just had got my electrical license. Worked for a company at Danvers, and one of our big accounts was Salem Oil and Grease, and that owner, Salty Smith, he was the character.
Salty
was
Smith.
He was about 5'6" tall and about 5'6" wide.
Why?
He was huge, but great guy. He says he told my boss at the time, Brian Craney, I bought a boat. I'm going to go fishing, bluefin tuna fishing. Do you have anybody that would like to go do that? And Brian thought of me because he knew I like to fish. I used to go out in his boat a lot. And he approached me about it. I'm like, what the hell's a bluefin tuna fish? No idea what it was. I'm like, I know what a bluefish is. Not the same thing. We go out, I look at the boat and had it set up well. Nice 34-foot Tiara. I set up for fishing. I'm like, this is cool. Equipment that I'd never seen before. Heavy equipment. Big rods, big reels, big line, big everything. I'm like, what the hell are we fishing for? Still had no idea. Back then you didn't have Google. You couldn't Google what's the bluefin tuna fish. I mean, you had no idea. He explains to me what a bluefin tuna fish is. I said, what? Those swim off the coast? Are you kidding me? I said, yeah. All right. So that was my start in really deep sea bluefin tuna fishing. We really sucked at it though. Oh my God.
What year do you think that was, Scotty? What year do you think that was?
Probably 2000.
2000.
Yeah, probably 2000.
So you come off the north coast of Boston. How far out do you have to go?
So the boat was in Beverly at Port Marina, and we'd go out from there out of Beverly Harbor or into the ocean. It takes about an hour. So the bluefin tuna fish actually run off a Stellwagen Bank. They run up and down the East Coast, but Stellwagen Bank, which is known for bluefin tuna fish because has a very steep drop on it, and on that edge, that's where the fish like to eat. Takes about an hour to get from Beverly out to Stellwagen Bank. There's two seasons. There used to be 2 seasons in bluefin tuna fishing, which was early season, which is trolling, which you're dragging baits across the surface of the water. And that's the water's still cold, so the fish are on the surface, and you have better luck trolling. It's called trolling. Then you do later in the season when the water warms up. They tend to go down deeper into the water.
You're dragging bait on the top, and there's a line.
Yes.
Okay.
So you have basically, you can have up to 4 rods. Some guys have more, some guys have less, but we had 4 rods spread across the back of the boat and set at different distances out from the back of the boat. and you troll either, mackerel or plastic squid or, whatever the bait might be hot at that time. And you just do that for hours on end. You leave at 4 a.m. and you do it all day at 5, 6 o'clock at night. And you just drive around. You drive around, and hope something bites. So you do that for months on end. And so we didn't know what we were doing. We sucked, basically. So one day, though, we got lucky. My first bluefin tuna fish scared the shit out of me. The rod, when it hits the bait trolling, it's like an explosion. And then this poor little rod, you have to imagine 200-pound test line with 40 pounds of drag, and it's going out so fast, you think the reel's broken. It's going out so fast. You think you're going to run out of line that fast. But finally, the fish slows down, and then it's just a battle after that. You're reeling against the fish and trying to get him to the boat. And I just was like, what am I doing? And I'm straddling the gunnel. I'm doing everything wrong to get this fish to the boat. The rod hold the brakes. It was a horror show. But finally, we get to the fish to the boat, and Salty climbs off the bridge and gets the harpoon and sticks it. And we get the fish. So we get back. We get back to the dock. We go into Gloucester because that's where you sell them.
They're always from Gloucester.
Yeah, always from Gloucester. Yeah, that's it. So we sell it because we're newbies. We take a porking on it. They just say, who the hell are these guys? So they screw us on it. And then we get back to the dock, and I'm going to explain a term to you. So it's a term we call what we were at that time. It's called a Googan. I don't know where the term came from. A Googan is someone who's never done this before and is like a weekender fishing. Know what they're doing, gets lucky. So we were Googans. So the Googans pull into the dock, and a Googan will raise a flag, a tuna flag, on the outrigger to show you caught a fish. Now, real fishermen don't. Googans do. So as Googans would do, we raise the flag up. Hey, we got a fish. So slip next to us, Billy and Donna Monte, on the commercial fishermen to the core. They used to bluefin tuna fish when they used to use hand lines, no rod and reel. I mean, they've been doing it for ages and ages. We pull in, and they're right next to us, on the slip next to us. They see the flag, they start laughing. I'm like, hey, we caught a fish. Well, first of all, they never thought we'd ever catch a fish. Neither, I didn't ever think we'd do it, but we did. They laugh. Congratulations. And I really hadn't ever talked to them before because, we were Googans and they don't talk to Googans. But we caught a fish, and they talked to us because they wanted to know where we were, what time of day, what did we use for bait. They wanted to know all the information so they can go out and do the same thing. Yeah, that's the way that works. So, time passed. Some things happened on the Salty's boat and couldn't fish anymore. Billy and Donna Monte were looking for an extra mate. So I went to fish with them, and had 25 years I fished with them. All kinds of tuna fishing. I mean, all kinds of fishing, actually. And it was always weekends. For me, it was just a weekend thing to get out of what I'm doing during the week, to relax, have a good time, catch some fish, make some money. Fun. And enjoyed it. Good the hell out of it. So, 20 years goes by, and we moved the boat to Gloucester, and we fished out of Gloucester. Always from Gloucester.
Gloucester. They're always from Gloucester.
So
They're always from Gloucester.
one day, Billy Monty comes up to me and says, hey, want to be in a TV show? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? This company, Groom Films out of California, that wants to make a reality TV show about tuna fishing. I'm like, you shitting me. Really? Okay. The hell? Well, I got nothing else to do, right? Billy talks to the guys. They said, yeah, okay. We had to do auditions. So what they did was they sent out disposable video cameras out from California, and they gave us a script, a bunch of questions to read from it. And we each held the camera for each other, and we read off these questions and the script. And we said, okay. We sent it back. Didn't hear anything for months. Then one day, we get a call. Hey, we're coming out from California. We want to do sit-down interviews with your crew. Okay. So much like we're doing right now, in front of a camera, 2.5 hours. You got a producer, cameraman, sound man, in a makeshift studio, just hurling questions at you, one after another, and just that's it. I mean, it went on for hours sitting there in that chair in front of that camera, lights, the whole 9 yards. Okay, they leave. Another couple months go by, and we're still tuna fishing. It's now November. I get a call from Mike Nichols, producer of the TV show. Says, "Hey, Scott, you're going to be a TV star." What? Yeah, we selected the Bounty Hunter as one of the boats for the initial season of Wicked Tuna. At that time, it was called Blue Gold. They changed the name to Wicked Tuna. I said, "You're shit." I said, "Okay." And then it just went on from there. They came. We're in November. Tuna season is just about over. I mean, it only goes till the end of November to beginning of December, maybe, because the weather turns to crap. Fish are still around, but you can't fish. So we had to get 6 episodes in a short amount of time. So they all fly out. Big production crew flies out from California. 5 boats in the initial season, and so they had to set up each boat, wire each boat, cameras, sound, the whole 9 yards. And then, that's how Wicked Tuna started.
Do you remember if you knew at the beginning it was going to be on National Geographic, or were they shopping it around?
Now, so what happened is this was the pilot. So they did the pilot, 6 episodes for the pilot year. And then after the pilot, they put out feelers, and National Geographic said, "Okay, we'll buy it." And that's when they got me.
And you got like $200 for the season 1?
Oh, my God. Talking about a bunch of dumbasses. So they send us this contract. I mean, it's like this.
I remember this. Yeah.
And I'm like, get to the last page and sign it. Don't read it. Just sign it. And like dumbasses. So
you didn't have an entertainment lawyer look over it?
No, I had nothing. We just signed it and said, screw it.
He sent me he brought me the contract. And I read through this. You have no rights. You give up everything. And I think they were getting maybe $500 per episode or something like that. And that might have been the whole crew.
Actually, it was more than that, but yeah. Okay. It was they were generous with the episodes.
Okay.
But you had to be in an episode. So if you were out fishing and you didn't do anything and nothing happened and you didn't fall overboard, you didn't create any action, and you weren't in an episode, you didn't get paid. Mm-hmm. You had to be in an episode to get paid.
Right. But, when we talked about it, I said, well, Scotty, you're going out fishing anyway. So there's cameras there, and you're going to just do what you've been doing. So what's the downside? I don't understand. It's not like you have to take time off your other jobs.
Residuals, nothing.
Well, no.
You're not getting residuals from Wicked Tuna?
No, nothing.
But it was for the exposure. So anyway, they go and do this. And there's a little bit of a backstory here, Michael, because my whole life, knowing Scotty, he was a tuna fisherman. And I never really understood what that meant. And every Saturday he would do this. So we would make sure that, we worked around not needing Scotty, because we were working all the time. Because some guys are golfers, and Scotty was a tuna fisherman. And, every once in a while he would tell us some stories about things that went on out there, but I never really could comprehend it. I think the only boat I've ever even seen was the banana boat at the Dairy Queen. I'm an inner city kid, just never had the opportunity. I started to feel, I was like, why doesn't he ever invite me out fishing with him on a Saturday? I think it's like, a bunch of guys getting together with a keg of beer and going out and fishing in the bay. Eventually, I think I might have said something to Scotty about that. Like, why don't you invite us out? And he said, you don't understand, Jim. It's not like that. This is not a charter boat with a bunch of drunk guys. This is serious business. And first of all, it's the livelihood of the people that are on the boat. It's expensive, and it can be dangerous. And, sometimes they would, go out for like a whole weekend. They'd be out on the water overnight. And I never understood that for a long time.
In the hierarchy of fishing, if you're anchored up in fishing, you're at the top of the totem pole. and other boats have to maneuver around you. In this instance, we stayed anchored. Big dragger came by us and tried to scare us. He circled all the way around, and he actually scooped up our anchor. So he keeps going, zoom! Now he's got your anchor, and he's dragging you along with him.
That's horrifying.
It is scary because there are times when we are bridle anchored, it's off the side of the boat, and in those instances, they actually could flip the boat, take the boat and flip it right over. That's a Nantucket sleigh ride.
So I just said, okay, great. I said, maybe he just doesn't want me out there. I don't know, because I'm generally not a nice person most of the time. So when the Wicked Tuna thing comes along and I read the contract for him and I say, I would do it just because you're doing it anyway. What's the downside? It's okay. Well, I remember when they had the premiere in Boston. Was that the Wang? I think it was at the Wang. And that was a huge event. It dominated the media. And I said, these guys are for real. This is really something. At one point, I remember Scotty told me a story about his mother. She must have watched an episode or a trailer or something. And she said to him, Scotty, if you keep doing this, you're going to get fired. And he said, what do you mean? She said, that's not you. That's not the guy. You're not being my son. You're not being that personality that we all know you have. You're very stiff, and you just don't. You're not doing it right. They're gonna get rid of you. That must have had an impact, Scotty, because later on I saw an episode when Scotty goes off on some guys that were supposed to be loading the boat early in the morning. They weren't doing it fast enough. He tears them off.
Come on, let's go. You guys are late. Let's go. Pick up the pace.
And then it cuts to Scotty screaming to a guy on another boat and giving a few choice words. Yeah. And
fish.
And eventually what happens is Scotty just becomes the Scotty that we know. He's highly intelligent, he's got a great vocabulary, but he's got this demeanor that you develop when you work in construction. A lot of times you win through intimidation. You have to have the knowledge, but you also, if you're a pansy, they're going to run right over you. So you learn to be a tough guy if you're going to run a crew and get things done. And so that part of Scotty he had, but he turned it off. And once he turned it back on, this great character came out that you see on Wicked Tuna. I think you guys were on for the first 3 seasons.
Guggen, who parks right next to you, only bad things can happen.
Oh, come over there! I'll kill you!
And I got scream and yell at this, and he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong because he has no idea, because he's a Guggen.
Right?
Yeah, 3 seasons, and
it was great. It was just.
It would have been more, but
I remember watching you years later. When I was in Mexico, we were building one of the Rustic Kitchens in Mexico, and they had dubbed him in. He's Scotty speaking in Spanish.
Yeah, Portuguese. I friends of mine from Portugal. My parents send a video of me in Portuguese, speaking Portuguese. So
swearing in Portuguese, swearing in Spanish, and
it was awesome.
So
that was worldwide. It was all over the world.
Yeah, Wicked Tuna was big.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think they just wrapped up.
It was fun.
They just wrapped up.
Yeah, last year. It was the last season.
It was a 10-year run. The 10-year run, longer.
Yeah, 10-year run. It was good.
Run.
I never thought it would go 10 years. But,
yeah.
It had a loyal following. Yeah, it went through a lot of changes. The first year was the best year for us because it was just raw. It was unscripted. It was really raw because it was the pilot and there were no rules. It was do what you want to do.
Waiting. Some people wear gloves, but I love the smell of chum in the morning. Neutral, this is the bounty hunter. That's the best. People want to count us down and out. Tell you what, you. We're an hour and a half into the fight. He's taking 50 pounds of drag like it's nothing.
When National Geographic bought the show, it became a little more scripted, a little more family friendly, I will say. There was many beeps. I was known as Mr. Beep.
You were Mr. Beep, right?
Yeah, Mr. Beep.
Long beeps.
Wasn't there some crew of like young guys, college guys, like tie-dye something or
Pinwheel.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
They were good. Yeah. He's a really good fisherman. Tyler McLaughlin. Yeah, he's an outstanding fisherman. But his crew, drugs are a bad thing, and some things happen there.
Yeah.
Lost some crew, but really good fishermen. Everybody in that show are fishermen. It wasn't the joke. They were outstanding.
So one of the byproducts of this, Michael, as Wicked Tuna was progressing, Scotty would tell me some of the stories of when they would go out filming it. And I said, how do they, they come up with these ideas and these scripts, and then how do they get you guys to do all those different things? And he said, no, it's not like that at all. It's the opposite. There's cameras everywhere. There's mics everywhere. And we go off fishing. And whatever happens. We don't catch a fish. There's a storm. We have a trawler that pulls up next to us too close. Whatever happens in the normal course of our fishing, they just record everything on multiple cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And they have different...
They record everything.
And so you have these different crews on different boats that are doing this all over. And then all the footage gets sent back to the production company. They watch it all, and then they start to stitch together.
Did you have on the boat a camera operator, or is everything locked down and it's just you guys?
No, we had a producer.
There were people on the boat. Okay.
The handheld. Yeah, he had a producer. Because the boats are relatively small, you had a producer. He did the camera and the sound, but he had the handheld camera. But there were also 7 or 8 fixed mount throughout the boat, and they got everything. I mean, it's not. I mean, you pick your ass. You do this, you do that. Everything you say. So it's like they don't miss a thing. But you always have to be. You got to be careful what you say, because you don't want to say this. Typically on the boat, you say a lot of things, and you really, you can't. Some of them aren't too good. So you kind of scale back from that, because they record everything. You have a mic, and they record every freaking word you say all day long. And the days are long.
And then at the end of the season, you have to sit down and they try to just get a bunch of VO or you telling stories to match.
So what happens is at the end of the season, exactly, they made a studio in Gloucester, decorated it. You sit down hours on end in the seat, just like this, and put together the episode. So questions, what did you feel here? What happened here?
Fill in the gaps.
What was going
on.
Tell the
story.
Yeah. So, they just the backstory. And you do that for every episode. So those sessions go 3, 4, 5 hours at a time to fill in. And that's everybody. I mean, you think about 15, 20 guys, they got to do that too.
There are no secrets in tuna fishing. You just have a great attitude. That's
woo. Yeah, that became. Yeah, it was really hard doing that.
It was a lot of work. A lot of work for a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Then you had groupies and fans.
All our staff loved you. So
at that time, it was. You had a lot of, you go to the grocery store and guys flip out. So that gets kind of embarrassing. And you got to run. I mean, you got to run and hide. I mean, the people are crazy. So that happened for quite a while until we weren't on the show anymore. Then it kind of died off. But it's still, to this day, it still happens. Occasionally here, I'll be out around shopping somewhere and some guy goes, "Hey, I know you. We met somewhere."
Yeah.
I'm like,
so it's only guys that come up to you to recognize you?
Yeah, people, yeah. So
I know, Wicked Tuna, hey!
Okay.
So when you would see an episode, you would see for the first time what storyline they sort of laced this whole thing into.
Yeah, I had no idea. Yeah.
And I thought that was fascinating, Michael. The premise of that helped us later with the cooking show on how we would sort of tell our story with the cooking show.
Reality television is not real? Wait, what?
Yes, there is nothing real about reality television.
Yeah, that's true. Ours was real as far as the fish and catching the fish and all that stuff. But all the crap behind the scenes was at some point you have to make it interesting and you have to make it people, what was really weird was the show was really popular from like the Mississippi West. So, people who had no idea what tuna fishing was
Mm.
and weren't familiar with it and all the aspects of it, that was something else. The local people, didn't really take to it too much.
Do you
But-
know? So a fish that comes into Gloucester, where does that end up? Do you know what the life cycle?
So it ends up. So it's changed over the years. It used to be when we first started, you would bring a fish into Gloucester, and it was two markets. There was the local market and the Japanese market. So you would, and the buyers would give you a price for the fish, and they would pay you on the spot for the fish. They test it and grade it, and then screw you, and then you get paid. As the years progressed, it became you send everything on consignment. So every fish you catch, if it's good enough quality, and by then you know what the quality of the fish is. I mean, you know it long enough, you understand the color, the taste, not so much the taste, but the color, the fat content, the
So
shape.
they push
all
that
those
they
things
push that
play in.
stick like a pipe in, and it pulls out a little.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it pulls they core the fish to see what the color is, the fat content. But the shape, all that stuff matters to the Japanese. You take your fish and you send it overseas, and it goes onto their market. They auction, and then you get paid minus all the expenses to send the thing over there. But
And the
you get
auctioneer's
paid per
fee
pound.
and all that. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
some of
that's what
those
happens now.
fish could go for $30,000.
Yeah, not so much anymore. But in the early season fish, when there's no fish on the market, and if it's a super high quality, big enough, I mean, it has to be really a diamond to get that kind of money. The average, you get $8-10 a pound on average. Some of the that's what we used to laugh about is, on the show, you always see, well, they got this much money for the fish. No, we don't even know, no idea what we got for the fish. It hasn't gone to Japan yet. But
They lied.
yeah, no, don't lie. But yeah, it was, you wouldn't, they had to do that because you had no correlation to what a fish actually was and how much it cost and that. So, it made sense. But yeah, that's really what the process was. And still today, no one buys fish local anymore. They all send them. We send them to Japan.
Now, I have a photo of you, Scotty, with a fish that is, I don't know, is 11-foot tuna.
Yeah, 1,000-pounder. That's the 1,000-pounder. Yeah, 123 inches tall, 23 inches long, about 1,000.
That was the largest tuna that you guys
Yeah.
caught.
That's the largest fish largest fish I was involved with. Some 900-pounders, some 800s, but that's the largest fish overall. I mean, over 1,100 pounds.
Scotty, at one time, we had him in on one of our cooking shows, and he talked all about, the process, being on Wicked Tuna and catching the fish. And then Liz, made a whole tuna dish, and that was a lot of fun. And there was some guy in the back of the studio that was a rabid, groupie Wicked Tuna guy that was like literally, reeling in as Scotty was telling the story, and we threw a camera on him, and he was just beside himself that he was in a show with Scott Ferriero from Wicked Tuna.
All right. Love this. Awesome. This is what it's all about. Right here. You wonder why I do this? This is why I do this. Right here. Forward, Billy, to the right.
Get Scotty to say, real, 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 real.
Real, 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 real.
So now, Scotty, your day job is with Boston Light Source, right?
After all the building and all the fun stuff, I needed a job. By that time, I had a little bit of reputation around town. So I had the guy from Color Kinetics, who I had worked with closely on all the projects, was really good friends with the owner of Boston Light Source. And he made a recommendation to him for me. And I went in and interviewed with them, and they hired me, and I've been there 18 years now.
So, Michael, when we were building some of our restaurants, we had people involved. You have Scotty, you have Jake, you have us, we have Cy, we have people. So we're bringing this world-class team of people to do a restaurant for ourselves, which, once we launched Rustic Kitchen. So we're putting a facility on the market that looks and feels and has the value of 3 or 4 times what it cost us to build. And, in the studios themselves alone, we built a studio for $450,000 that someone else couldn't do for $1.5 million, because eventually we started building them for $1 million, but they were $3 million studios.
You show up with your pirate ship of contractors and you guys put it together.
It's a very good point. Some of the best times I remember is working on his project. So, for me, and I always used to say this to him, when you walk into a restaurant, it's your senses that are going to tell you if you enjoy your meal.
All 5 senses.
You walk in, first thing I always said to him is the smell. How does the restaurant smell? 1. Are you comfortable with the lighting? Is it harsh? Is it obnoxious to your senses? And then what do you hear? If any one of those things are off, it's going to change the way you feel about your meal. So those are always the design, guidelines we'd always think about when we did our restaurants. So when you walk in there, you have to feel comfortable, and everything has to be, smell good and sounds good, look good. And that was always the best thing about Jimmy's projects is they are always like that. They always look great. They always smell good because they always had good cleaners, and we always did a good job lighting them and made it comfortable on people. That's some of the the fondest memories I have about the restaurants we did. It was always fun because you'd always have these unbelievable design elements that, how do we make this look good? How do we like that? Or that's some of the stuff that was really, I'll always remember.
Yeah, and if it had been done before, Michael, we weren't interested. We really wanted to put things out there that hadn't been done before.
Like those remember when you were putting the molds up at one point and you realized they spun, and you're like, oh, what if these could be spinning the big the molds in I think Scotty remembers what I'm talking about. The big molds in the bar cafe of Stewart Street. The bottom piece goes in and it spins
the finials.
with the long iron, screw.
Yeah.
And little things like that.
We could have done that. It would have been a very, very expensive detail. But yeah, we had a way to actually have the finials spin if we wanted to.
Yeah.
When we were doing Boston, Rustic Kitchen at Park Square, and I wanted to sort of have something different on the lighting, Scotty would research. And in those days, he'd print different lights and put them all together in a package, and we'd meet on a construction job and we'd go through them. And he showed me this one light fixture. It looked like a big onion. So that's cool. He said, yeah, this is a company, it's an atelier in Israel. And it's a company called Aqua Creations.
Scotty, you found the portobello mushroom light fixtures?
Yeah.
Never knew that.
Found that company. And so
these are massive.
They have different
These things are like
ones.
10 feet wide.
Yeah. And he said they have one, these look like, this one's called the Sam. And I said, well, that looks like a shrimp. The one that looks like an onion, it's called a palm. I said, well, it looks like an onion. And then he showed me the one, whatever the name was. And I said, it looks like a mushroom. I said, so what we could do is we could buy all these light fixtures and we could say that we had them custom made for us as vegetables. And I'm letting the cat out of the bag now, but it's 25 years, so it doesn't really matter. But that was our storyline.
You lied?
There's
so many lies I'm discovering today. Jeez.
No, I think it's called creative license. We took creative license. We embellish and we took creative license. But I told people for years that we had a company that made these light fixtures for us, and they were all made to be like different vegetables. And they all looked exactly like the vegetable that I claimed.
Cremini mushrooms.
Yeah, squash blossom.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, and Aqua Creations didn't even have a distributor in the Boston area. I think we had to buy them out of New York originally.
New York, yeah.
And then later on, they had a company up in Lynn.
They had a dealer in Boston.
Yeah.
Ungodly expensive. I said, listen.
Well, that was the other thing.
We're going to buy a lot of these. I need to go New York and talk to the real people.
Do you remember inadvertently creating a dish at Rustic Kitchen, the Scotty salad?
Yeah, Scotty salad.
I
There you
my memory
go.
is it was either like the week before we opened or week after, but you didn't intend
was-
to get that though. You wanted a
That's
calamari
right.
and a salad.
You did. That's
And
exactly.
it was like the first ticket that was running into the kitchen, and the kitchen they didn't know what to do, and so they made a calamari salad that turned out great. The aioli and
It was
the
in
dressing.
the Parmesan. It was in the Parmesan bowl, right? They combined the Caesar salad with the
Caesar salad.
calamari
The fried
appetizer.
calamari.
With the lemon
And toss
aioli.
it all together.
Toss it together, and it
And
became
the
a staple.
became the Scotty.
It became the Scotty. It was
Yeah.
a staple.
That was good.
Scotty inadvertently did, save a life because, you know what? Let's let Kathy tell the story. Go ahead.
So you were in Coral Gables doing pescado. I hadn't seen you in a while. I would call and you really sounded off. And I don't know if Scotty called me or someone called me and said, things are not going well down here. And I just
It was Scotty.
dropped the phone, made plane reservations, and I flew down and she didn't tell anybody I was coming. I showed up at
Carrie
on
Murphy
the job
watched
site.
Sarah and I. You had called Carrie and said, Carrie, can you watch Sarah and Michael? I gotta go to
I said,
Miami.
watch the
Jim's
kids.
about to kill someone.
Yeah, it was.
I showed up on the job site, still with my suitcase in hand, and I ran in there, and I see Jimmy like he's about to kill somebody.
Yeah, there was towards the end that was rough. There's no question about it.
Was it a building inspector or was it somebody?
The problem was they were moving the goalpost. And every time we would have another really aggressive schedule, we had to be open for the grand opening of the mall. And my landlord is my partner. And every time this inspector would come by, he wanted to have more steel put up for bracing along the perimeter windows for hurricane requirements, or he would want, my structural engineer's report on what I already put in. But whatever it was, it never seemed to be enough. And all the while we're racing ahead towards this grand opening. The pressure is building and building and building and building. And on this particular day, he had come late for an inspection, and we're waiting around for him. He finally comes in. He doesn't like what we did, and he comes up with another whole set of bracing that he wants to see up there. And he starts to leave before I can even engage him. And as he's starting to go through the crowd and he goes through all the contractors working, saws buzzing, and ladders and everyone hanging from the ceiling. He goes out the door to the patio where we have men setting tile, and I go out the door literally ready. I'm going to spin this guy around and I'm going to kill him. And as I reach, Kathy steps in front of him, and she looks at me and she says, "Hi, Jim. How's it going?"
And then, hold up.
And it started to hit me. In order for her to be here, she had to get a babysitter. She had to fly. No one knew about it. And I calmed down, and I forgot about the building inspector. And later, I heard the whole story about her talking to Scotty and how things are going on there not good. And she took it upon herself to fly down and sort of, at that one moment, she literally, and Scotty and her, they saved this guy's life, because had I was 6 inches away from grabbing him by the throat, it would have been all over.
The reality is, if you just reach in your pocket and brought out some cash, you probably could.
Well, that's really
that's
what
true.
the bottom line is I wasn't paying, we never did that. I was not paying off any official, any building inspector, any one of these guys, fire inspector. I mean, they're all, depending on what town you were in. New Orleans was at a whole different level.
Fire chief in New Orleans.
The fire chief in New Orleans, yeah, he called me a goddamn Yankee. So, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Accurate.
It was. So, yeah. So these are some of the things that, bond you together over the years. But the Pescado story, true story. And, I'd probably be just getting out of jail now. So what would be 20 odd years? I'd just be paroled. No, if not for good behavior.
All right.
Well, listen, Scotty, I can't thank you enough. It was so much fun talking to you and
Good seeing
going
you.
back over the years on some of these
A
projects.
key
And we
part
really
of the
see how
Rustic
you
Kitchen
guys-
family. I think all the Rustic Kitchens you've touched in some regard,
Mhm.
built, designed.
Yep.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into the whole studio side of it. Maybe we'll do a backup call someday about Scotty's involvement and Jake's involvement on building all of these studios over the years.
Studios. And
But, we're not done yet. COVID definitely turned us sideways for
That
a
was
while,
rough.
but, we're working our way back. And Michael runs the company now. It's his company. And I have a couple of things I'm working on that I'll be talking to you about if I can get them to the next level. And if Kathy can tolerate me continuing to do this. But no, it was great. Loved having you on. It was a lot of fun. And, I'm sure when you jump off, we can double back.
Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you, Scotty.
thank you.
Take care.
Scotty, thanks.
It's fun.
Bye, Kathy. Bye, Mike.
Bye.
Great talking.